Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into something that affects pretty much everything we do, self-control. It's that little voice, that force inside us that decides whether we actually finish that big project, drag ourselves to the gym, or say no to that second slice of cake.
And Oscar Wilde, he really hit the nail on the head here. This isn't just a clever line. It gets at a struggle that is fundamentally human, right? We all have these amazing goals and the best intentions, but temptation, man, it is a powerful and constant force. So, how do we actually win this battle inside our own heads? Okay, so here's our game plan for today. We're going to start by looking at why we procrastinate. Then we'll get to know the two competing systems in your brain. We'll uncover the real secrets of that famous marshmallow test. And then, this is the good part, we'll get practical with how you can actually rewire your own willpower. It all leads to this one big idea. Self-control is a skill you can build.
First up, let's tackle something I'm guessing we all know a little too well: procrastination. We tend to beat ourselves up over it, right? Call ourselves lazy. But what the science is telling us is a completely different and frankly more interesting story.
So it turns out chronic procrastination, it's not a character flaw. It's actually an emotional regulation problem. Think about it. When we avoid doing something, it's usually not because we can't do it, but because the task itself makes us feel bad, anxious, bored, maybe insecure. So putting it off gives us this little hit of temporary relief. And that relief feels good, which just reinforces the habit. And boom, you're stuck in a cycle of avoidance and stress. So what is going on in our brains that makes us choose that short-term relief over our own long-term goals? Well, the answer is in our neural architecture, which is basically home to two very different competing systems. I mean, you see it in the headlines all the time, right? Really successful people making these disastrous, impulsive decisions that just blow up their lives. But honestly, this question applies to all of us. Why do we act against our own best interests, even when we absolutely know better? This whole conflict really comes down to two parts of our brain going head-to-head. You've got the hot system, that's your emotional, impulsive limbic system that's basically screaming, I want it, and I want it now. And then you've got the cool system. That's your logical, future-thinking prefrontal cortex. At its core, willpower is really just the ongoing battle between hot and cool. Now, this internal tug-of-war was studied in this brilliant, simple, but incredibly profound experiment that started way back in the 1960s. You've probably heard of it. Yup, it was the iconic marshmallow test. Picture this. A little kid is left all alone in a room with a single marshmallow sitting right in front of them. And here's the deal. You can eat it now, or if you can just wait 20 agonizing minutes until the researcher comes back, you get two. A simple, but wow, a powerful test of delayed gratification. But here's the part that most people miss. The kids who succeeded didn't just sit there and suffer. No, they actively coached themselves through it. They weren't just good waiters. They were little strategic thinkers who used mental tools to get to their goal. And the stuff they did was just brilliant. These are what we call cooling techniques. They'd physically distance themselves, cover their eyes, turn their backs. Or even more clever, they would mentally transform the marshmallow. By pretending it was just a picture, a fluffy white cloud, they drained it of its hot, tempting power. They literally hacked their own brains to give their cool system a fighting chance. And here's where it gets truly wild. This was never just about marshmallows. Researchers followed these kids for decades, and the correlations they found were just stunning. The kids who could wait longer went on to have higher SAT scores, better social skills, lower rates of substance abuse, and even a lower BMI 30 years down the line. That one brief moment of self-control was an incredible predictor of long-term success and well-being. Okay, so that's fascinating, but what does it mean for us right now? Well, the great news from all this research is that self-control isn't some fixed trait you're born with. It's a set of cognitive skills that we can all learn and strengthen. So let's look at the toolkit. One of the most effective tools is something called an if-then plan. It's basically like writing a little preloaded script for your brain. So instead of having to rely on raw willpower and the heat of the moment, you create this automatic link between a trigger and the behavior you want. See, by creating and just mentally rehearsing these simple little plans, you take the effort out of effortful control. Your cool system does all the planning ahead of time. So when that hot trigger shows up, like the dessert menu, your brain just automatically fires off the response you already decided on.
You're basically tricking your hot system into doing the cool system's work for you. It's brilliant.
Okay, another really powerful cooling strategy is what's called self-distancing. When you're stuck ruminating on a painful memory or you're just feeling overwhelmed with anger, shifting your perspective can make a huge difference. Try imagining yourself as an observer, like a little fly on the wall, watching the situation unfold. It helps you analyze what's happening instead of just reliving those hot emotions, and that can lead to insight and closure. And finally, this is a really fascinating one. How connected do you feel to your future self? I mean, look at the circles here. Researchers have found that when people see a strong overlap between who they are now and who they'll be later, they are much, much better at making smart long-term choices, like saving for retirement. But if your future self feels like a total stranger, if those circles are really far apart, your hot system is going to win every time. Why would you sacrifice something today for someone you don't even really know? So when you put all of this research together, it points to one incredibly powerful conclusion. Your capacity for willpower, it is not predetermined. It is not your destiny. The work of Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck is so important here. It shows that our fundamental beliefs about our own abilities change everything. If you have an entity mindset, you think your intelligence or your willpower is just a fixed trait. You either have it or you don't. But if you have a growth mindset, you see them as skills that can be developed. And just believing that by itself dramatically improves your ability to learn and to push through challenges. And look, this isn't just a theory in a psychology lab. It's being put into practice out in the real world. The KIPP charter schools, for example, have built their entire curriculum around explicitly teaching these kinds of character and cognitive skills. They are living proof that with the right strategies and the right environment, self-control can absolutely be taught, nurtured, and strengthened.
Ultimately, what all this science is telling us is that we are not prisoners of our impulses. Thanks to the incredible discovery of neuroplasticity, we now know our brains are constantly being reshaped by our experiences and by our choices. We actually have an active hand in shaping who we become. In the end, this ability to regulate yourself is the master skill for living a successful life. And all this research leaves us with a resounding, optimistic answer to this final question. With the right tools and the right mindset, you absolutely can.